Welcome to the Highly Enlightened podcast, syndicated by Ganjapreneur. I'm your host, Jon Purow. So on this podcast, we interview cannabis luminaries, and I also cover golden nugget stories, which are stories that are not getting as much attention as I think they should. So tune in, join us, and as always, stay grassy, my buds. All right, so I have the pleasure right now, on another one-hitter episode of my Highly Enlightened podcast, syndicated by Ganjapreneur, to be here with Jordan Whittaker, the CEO of the Weedaker Group. It's a pleasure having you on the pod.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah.
Thank you for, sharing all this time.
So we are here with the host of the wonderful event that puts us, so I could have Fenway Park, and home plate in the backdrop of this, interview. So
it's a dramatic setting.
I'm
really love it.
I'm not biased in your favor whatsoever either, when it comes down to it. Yeah. But I just wanted to, first ask you from the host perspective, as someone who's been in this market and sees it, like you could survey this room, all of this is yours,
It's ours.
It's ours as a community.
Yes, it certainly is.
This is our doing.
Yeah.
So what's what's your perspective on this and something that you've learned from hosting something like this?
Wow. I am incredibly moved by creating a vision and a dream of people coming together in good spirit to share the same passion, drive, and purpose, but from all different angles of the world, right?
Yep.
We've got people in the room that it may be their first weekend. Hi. Sorry, so many VIPs that are pioneers, innovators that have been on the forefront of creating change in Massachusetts and nationwide for the plan.
Yep.
And so when you have a wild industry event like NECANN on year 11, we are challenged with the idea of having an after party or a time to bring people together to celebrate and also to inspire to keep working together.
Yes.
So everyone in here has something to offer. Everyone in here has plenty to gain. And we only do that when we show up together and we get the right people in the room that have their morals in check, right? Because we're always vetting people.
Yeah.
And that are part of the mission and the value of bringing people together and the idea of moving the industry forward. And so that looks different for everybody that's in here because we all have our own mission and our own why.
Exactly.
And then when you have a little fun and you dream a little extra, you start thinking, why not Fenway Park, right? This isn't a consumption event. Our team is we really pride ourselves on hosting private events in Massachusetts with industry leaders while we're awaiting social consumption rollout this year.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, the meantime, there's still ways to normalize and bring folks together and not shy away from, having an email address that has the word cannabis in it, or bringing folks. So my perspective. I know I'm riffing, and I'm so excited about it.
No. Just for the record, so right now, I want to light two gigantic pre-rolls in my hands and storm the streets.
Yes.
I'm very inspired by what you just said. So,
we can do that just outside. We're just gonna exit the venue, right? Lansdowne is lit. It certainly is. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. That sounds like a fun plan for later tonight.
That'll be a nice after party.
For you to celebrate, you're going to run through the streets, with a pre-roll like an Olympic torch to celebrate the victory.
I love the drama of that. I feel like we could really start a flash mob of sports. People would really buy into it, for sure.
Oh my God, if we had a flash mob of people who were all smoking pre-rolls, and doing it in the same way, puffing in coordination.
Protest with your puff.
That would be very, very funny.
We're getting there.
The puff past protest.
Yes.
Right? I could
Powerful.
think that.
Yes.
Yeah, that works for that. So now, to ask you the standard question, So what is something that you learned from the industry, macro, micro, past, present, future, take it in whatever direction you want, that you think is valuable for the industry to learn from you? And this should be so it comes off as a big question.
It is.
But someone could say something and it could be so specific, and I don't want you to hold back from that. If there's a trend that you're seeing now, what's a cool trend?
Tonight, the trend is that we need more space.
Yeah.
We need more space for more people to come together, right? Yeah. And a capacity creates exclusivity, and it makes sure that we're getting the right people in the room. But there's so many people that want to be a part of when other people buy in and are committed to it, right? Yeah. So when you're so confident and so clear about what the vision and the mission is, it's very easy to support that and to stand by it. And it becomes increasingly hard for other people to even have anything negative towards that, right?
Yep.
And when the mission is to bring people together, it's limitless.
No, exactly.
And there's never enough space, and there's never enough resources. But if we start where we're at, there's so many people who have been the first to do it. And who were the first ones to go to the State House and to rally together. And the first ones, to encourage other people to say, yes, we can, and this is how we're going to do it. And those people are here tonight.
Yes, we cannabis.
Yes, we cannabis. So I've learned a whole lot.
Yeah.
I keep learning, and I'm committed to that.
Yeah.
But this year in particular, I've challenged myself and our team to keep dreaming and keep doing and saying yes to things that feel good.
Yeah.
And absolutely not to anything that doesn't sit right with our own moral compass.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
And being authentic to what our cause is.
And there are things in this, you come across in this industry sometimes that test your moral compass, right?
Totally. There's a million ways and a million opportunities to sell your soul every given day. And I applaud you for considering those opportunities and moving past, And I mean that genuinely, that there's a lot of folks that,
No, I insist on only doing things the right way. Right? There's only one, like I say, if I live by the golden rule, I'll trust everything else as it happens,
Yes, yeah.
100%.
I think we have to trust the process.
Mm-hmm.
And if I knew what I know now 3 weeks ago, I would have spent less time standing right outside of here doubting the fact that this was valuable. Or questioning if this really was worth it, right? The industry is hard right now. There's a lot of people that, we're natural born risk takers, and we know that we're going against the norm by even tapping in or talking more about the plant, right?
No, I mean, we're trying to normalize, right? We're trying to fight the stigma, one little, I call it, not bit by bit, but hit by hit, right?
I love that.
It's just like we're normalizing hit by hit.
Yes.
And I just feel like that's so important to be able to say, oh, look, there was a cannabis event in Fenway.
Yeah.
Right?
Here we are.
Just that sentence alone normalizes it a very, very large extent.
Well, and I would say further that then we have to kind of challenge, what does that mean? What makes it a cannabis event?
Exactly.
Is it the people? Is it the consumption?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
No, it's the people in the room and the conversations that we're
That's
having
what
what brings us together in the first place, right?
Exactly.
This is a cannabis event at Fenway Park. We're paying customers. We've been welcomed. We've had a lot of conversations with community members and all of our stakeholders.
Yeah.
And we're committed to keeping doing that because everybody has concerns about how's this all going to go down.
No, I've been in front of community boards making arguments and everything, breaking out statistics and stuff, and it's a fun experience.
Yeah, it certainly is. But that piece of recommitting to, who's in the room and what's going on, it's like we've there's been so much to get us to the now.
Yeah.
And we're all very certain that there's a lot to get us ahead. So when I talk about reflecting right now, my message to everybody is to trust the process.
Yeah. I
truly, and if I could just everybody.
I know everybody
your
be
worst
patient.
Fears,
be patient. Be
right?
patient.
Be patient, but be adamant and be intentional, right?
Of course.
And recognize that we all have the same hours in the day.
Yep.
And there's power in numbers, and there's people doing so many incredible things, and there's different ways to either tap into that.
And that's why you need as many elastic collisions as possible to result in things that drive everybody forward.
In this room alone, there are pioneers, creators, there are researchers, there are advocates, activists, there are artists, there are the co-founders of record-breaking and life-changing, you fill in the blank.
Yeah.
And that is limitless potential. When you put all of that together and then we start thinking, all right, what's next?
Yeah.
It's good to reflect on the now and where we're at.
Yeah.
But we have to drive forward with the hope of the future.
I'm all about innovation in the sector.
Yeah, and feeling like the rain cloud of regulations from month to month, or everywhere we go, market to market. You know, there's folks that are coming from coast to coast, and
100%.
Just recognizing, all right, what's the law here? What can we do? What can't we do?
I mean, I think that the thing is that I realized over time that the things I love about this industry are obviously the devotion to the plant and the good that it will do for mankind, right, medically and in many other respects. And 1A is the people.
Yes.
Right. So I just,
people in the plant,
bringing together people like this, it's been a true pleasure. And it's been a true pleasure having you, join us on the podcast.
Thank you.
It was
so
totally
much.
worth chasing each other around for like an hour and a half to make this happen.
It's been hours.
But it was totally worth it.
Sure.
So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Welcome to another one-hitter episode of Highly Enlightened, my podcast with Jon Purow. I'm here with someone who I consider cannabis royalty personally, right? Mitch Pfeifer, Director of Brand Partners. I had to throw that out there. Director of Brand Partnerships, right, at Active, the vape company, which I tried earlier and thoroughly enjoyed, sir.
It works. Glad to hear it works.
I'm just being completely unbiased, right? Press, that's I got to get more used to that.
Yeah,
right. I got the legal ethics down, the journalistic ethics I'm working on.
You put good input in a good vessel, whether it's vape, paper, blunt, whatever. It's going to be good output.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. So, anyways, as I like to say, I like to ask, what do you, what's something that you learned from the industry, and you've learned a lot as an OG, like over the years, and you can say it's macro, micro, past, present, future, that you'd like to pass on to the rest of the industry?
I mean, it's two-pronged, and it's really, simple, but I feel like the best things in life are that simple. But it's like, one, cannabis is and always has been what it was. Legacy, medical, whatever, black market, gray market, whatever you want to call it, legal. There's a lot of principles and elements of consumerism and around just like commerce of the plant that have always been there and will always stay true, in my opinion. But then there's also this business element and brand building element that might be new to some people from the legacy side that is very much important, right? Key to just survival in this new landscape of something that's existed for a long time. So I'd say both of those things are just true. You know what I mean? There's this component that's been here that I think a lot of people can learn from. And there's also this component of business that pertains to any industry, any consumer packaged good that you're into, that could also be adopted over here when you're building brands and building a new SKU and getting it out in the market. So it's kind of simple and cut and dry, but
but you're saying
there's a reason it's cut and dry.
No, exactly. I think sometimes the most elegant explanations are the simplest ones, right? And so I think it's interesting, like you said, the fusion of the two different worlds, and in terms of like you're saying, you come in with I'm totally blanking. The first element that you said was
legacy,
exactly. So here's what I think that this would remind me of in terms of talking about legacy. That's cannilateral damage. Exactly what just happened. Cannilateral damage, right? So in terms of legacy, right? We are all we love our strains. And strains are not something that's owned like a brand. And so that, to my extent, is the legacy of the legacy market, is the fact that you say OG Kush when you show up at the dispensary because you've been smoking it for years, right? And that's what I consider is the brand loyalty of our industry, and that's the function of the legacy. And then you bring in the product diversification, right, of CPG, where you are going to be imbibing in every possible different way, and just you're tapping into the power of the plant in as many ways as possible. And I think that that's really cool, right? And I think that you very, very succinctly put your finger on something that I've always really enjoyed about the industry and never kind of communicated it effectively before. So I appreciate that.
I mean, this, like you said, the strain is strains are how we fall in love with stuff. And then, in the day, you're probably very far removed from the grower, which is now tied to the brand in most markets, not all. But, you're plugged. Knew there was varying levels of quality and price attached to that, right? And so there's just certain, like I said, certain components that have always transferred over into the market we're in, and now you're able to brand yourself and build yourself around strains or quality, right? And like you said, strains it doesn't matter, even if you have the proprietary access to genetics. There might be a bag seed somewhere, a clone might make its way out the back door. It's very hard to solely own said strain. So you can build yourself around a strain or originator or a breeder, but at the end of the day, you have to build your name around something. Maybe it's the breeding, maybe it's the ownage of a strain or a lineage, or maybe it's, hey, I'm the best of this or the best of this variety.
No, exactly. Well, I think that we're an industry that lives on the margins to some extent, right? Just because the way that we're forced to in terms of taxation, regulation, over-regulation, all of that. But I also just think that therefore any competitive advantage that you could get, right? Whether it's doing something better than anybody else, whether it's having different IP, right? Because I'm an IP nerd, whether it's your processes are better than, whatever it is, find your leg up. right? Find whatever it is that you do well and lean in.
And, to the point of what I said originally, there's a lot of people from the legacy market that like hate on new business models. And they might come from the growing side, but then, and I'm not disrespecting the grower because that's where it all starts. That's the most powerful person in this entire supply chain.
Yeah.
But even in the legacy market, the grower was, very, like I said earlier, very removed from the consumer. So you had a middleman, and then you had like a street level dealer or a hand-to-hand dealer, whatever, however you want to classify that.
Yeah.
That's what brands and products are now. So you can build a business model that's not built on growing and still build a brand.
Exactly.
You could have done the same thing in the legacy market. And I think sometimes these various levels and degrees, they always existed.
Yeah.
They're just presented in a different way.
Yeah.
So that's what I mean. The IP, you could have the IP as you know me and I'm your guy.
Yep.
And I'm always going to serve you quality.
Exactly.
My quality might come from a variety of growers.
No,
and that's
100%.
how it was in the legacy market.
No, exactly.
No disrespect. The growers, again, are the most important person. But I was able to build a brand because the growers couldn't back then. We're now in a world where the growers can build, but also, hey, me.
Yeah, no, exactly.
The broker, the middleman, I can also build a brand at various points of the supply chain.
Yeah, exactly. So I think I always focus on brands because I'm a brand geek, right? But I agree with you in terms of like the power of them, right? In terms of putting together these different elements, So I appreciate your coming on the pod. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Right?
Thank you. Yeah.
It was a pleasure geeking out about you.
Fenway Park, Boston, Massachusetts.
Fenway Park.
The Green Monster.
Exactly. It doesn't get old. All right. Cheers.
The podcast is proud to be sponsored by eBottles. If you're in the cannabis business, you know that quality packaging isn't just important, it's essential. That's where eBottles comes in. Whether you're just starting out or scaling up, eBottles offers proprietary, top-of-the-line packaging products built for cannabis. eBottles is the market leader for a good reason. They are experts in the field. 6 patents, 5 warehouse locations around the country, and a network of exceptional distributors. So get eBottles and grow boldly. Hello and welcome to another one-hitter episode of my highly enlightened podcast indicated by Gondrepreneur. I'm your intrepid host, Jon Purow, and I have here with me Sheila Fey, Director of Marketing for Nostalgia. Thank you so much for taking the time. I greatly appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Thrilled to be here.
Okay, so I'm going to hit you with just hard fire questions that you have no preparation for whatsoever.
Let's go.
No, I'm kidding. So I'd like to, first of all, just ask, your impressions of the conference and the feel in the Massachusetts market right now, which is, at an interesting point in its maturation, I would say.
It is. But you know what? The beauty of NECANN is that it truly and thoroughly just brings this community together.
Yep.
Despite the competition, despite the price compressions, despite everything happening in this crazy new industry, this event brings people together in the most beautiful and collaborative way. And that's what we love about NECANN. Yeah,
I like to, one of my pop puns I'm starting to use that I owe credit to Mitch Pfeifer for this, co-opetition, but it's kind of co-opetition.
Love that.
Yeah.
That's what this is all about.
No, exactly. So I'm glad that that's something to point out and to appreciate about it, that there's a lot of love in the room and devotion to the plant, even when technically you're competitors with some of these people.
Totally.
Yeah. So the next question I always like to ask, to some extent, is, what has the industry taught you, right, that you think would be useful for you to teach other people in the industry?
So one thing that I'm loving right now in the industry is kind of this movement away from focusing on THC. I mean, we've been talking about it for years, right? Yes. It's more than THC.
Exactly.
And that's what I love about the brand that I get to work with, Nostalgia. Our whole purpose is bringing back these legendary strains from the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. Yep. And what's beautiful about those strains is that they are truly pure sativas, pure indicas. Yes. And so we're able to kind of tell that story more about what's going into the plant other than just THC. We're able to talk about the terps and also the history of that strain. And that's what's really sparking people's interest in our brand, is they see these legendary names that they've heard in the songs, that they've seen in cultural references in movies. And now they get to see it on shelves, and they're connected to this strain, like the Durban Poisons from the 70s, the Lamb's Bread from the 60s, the Green Crack from the 90s.
Exactly. And you guys lean into this essentially by what you're saying, is that we're trying to source genetics that are as pure to those, of that time. And then you bring that to people. And we're such an interesting industry because, brand loyalty a lot of times in here is to strains, which is something that typically
no one can own.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so like you need to have another sales pitch with respect to strains. And your angle is, you say, we're doing two things. We're tying it to a specific, time period, right? That, that's when you grew up, right? Even like down to the packaging, you have it, the packaging matched the era in terms of the looks.
Yes.
Right.
And even we go beyond that. It's inside the package.
Yeah.
There's a strain card that has a little history lesson about that strain.
Yeah.
And attached to the strain card, there's a QR code that brings you to a playlist that was curated exactly for that strain. So it sets the vibe. It's from that decade.
Exactly.
It's about the entire holistic experience of smoking. That beautiful ritual that we all get to enjoy.
Yeah. For you, it wasn't just the end point of them trying the product. It was, the environs in which they're enjoying the product, trying to dictate that so that they're having that feeling of, oh, this is what it was like in college again.
Totally. And we get amazing feedback. I tell this story all the time, but I got an Instagram message on our business page recently on nostalgia.buzz from somebody who had found our Maui Wowie in a store in the beautiful 70s packaging.
Yeah.
And he reached out to say, listen, that was my dad's favorite strain and he passed away 10 years ago. And when I found that strain and I smoked that strain and I experienced that strain, I cried tears of joy. And
oh, wow.
That's what it's all about for us. It's about connecting
making your
people.
Consumers cry. No, I'm kidding. Tears of joy.
Tears of joy.
I'm kidding.
Exactly, though.
Yeah. So last question to ask is, what is something that you touched upon one thing that's kind of new and emerging in the industry, but is there anything else that jumps out at you as something that's an interesting trend that you're seeing on a micro level? Take this question where you will.
So in the industry, I am really excited again to kind of see people pulling back from focusing on the THC.
Exactly.
I want people to be a little bit more educated in their approach, and that's what we're trying to do in our organization, not only with our flower brand, but we also have dispensaries. And our dispensary, our bud tenders, they have been phenomenal in helping us educate those customers, because it's not the customer's fault that they come in looking for the highest THC. For in a lot of ways, it's the industry that has been pushing that for so long. And so now we're erasing all of that. We want to do what other people are not doing. And so our bud tenders at Elevated Roots at our 3 locations have been fantastic about helping get that point across about here's what terpenes are, here's what individual cannabinoids are, here's how they might impact what this particular product does for you.
Yeah. No, and I find that interesting. Look, I think that the focus on THC content is a negative thing for this industry, right? When it produces, things like lab shopping. Right. And also when you're dealing, higher potency products, there is the increased risk of, having certain effects psychologically that are not necessarily, as favorable. Right. And so I think that the way that you're saying it is very interesting to me, because it's popping in my head that it's almost to a certain extent immaturity of a market. Right. When people come in, immature, and they could be the younger folks a lot of times. Right. They're coming in to get to have a really, really strong effect. But as they get older, or older consumers and demographics inside the industry, they want nuance, right? And as I always like to say, the Delta 9 is the same in every single plant. The magic isn't there, right? The magic is in the other parts of the plant, and those are the ones that dictate effects a lot more. So I think it's a function of the immaturity of just focusing on getting as high as possible versus the maturity of saying, I want to experience different effects. I want nostalgia for something like this. So I greatly appreciate, that point. So yeah, thank you so much for coming on the pod. I really appreciate you taking your time, and it was a pleasure.
Likewise. Thank you so much,
cheers.
John. Cheers.
Welcome to another one-hitter episode of my podcast, Highly Enlightened, syndicated by Gondrepreneur. I'm your host, Jon Purow, and I'm here with Ian Loud of Loud Minds TV, right? And let me just start this one with 2 facts about him. One, this is purely fortuitous because I left my podcast equipment out here, and I came back to find Ian sitting next to it in a very, very specific, ritualistic prepping, right, of a J, which I thought was that was just a lot of fun. And then 2, when I was sitting down speaking with you, one of the people from NECAN, which the conference that we're at right now, someone walked by and said, "Oh, you got a good one for the podcast." So I was okay, all right. So I got to roll with this. Fate is telling, the universe has decided that I need to speak with you. So, for that reason, just welcome to the pod. Thank you for being here. Cheers.
Appreciate you.
Right. And so one, as I now understand that you are someone who's been involved in this industry for many, many years, give me a sense of where you see the mass market, how,
how that's reflected in the conference in any, capacity?
Honestly, I think everyone's just trying to find their grounding right now because the hoopla of the roller coaster of the fun has left the party, and now we're dealing with business. So now we kind of see people for who they are and what they're offering. But I will also say there's a whole bunch of new energy in there right now. We have social consumption coming out next, so that's reinvigorating what we've been missing.
Exactly.
People to the plant, plant to the people.
Yep.
It's been too much business to business, if you will. Then we've lost a lot of the medical side of things. So we've lost those people and those advocacy of those rights. But it seems like that space has been missing, and now we're seeing a resurgence of that as well. So it's just a new market, I would just say, and people really just kind of...
It's the maturation of a market.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, a lot of the things that I've been, people are saying, they're reflecting on is this is constantly changing. I always think back, it was Aaron Miles from Verano, right, who actually said one time, it's not that there's no such thing as a mature market. It's just which markets are more mature than others, right? Even California is still evolving in terms of how they're, doing things. So I think it's interesting what you say in terms of like, this is constantly shifting. This is the vibe that we have right now. And so another question I like to ask people is, what is something that you've learned from the industry that you'd like others in the industry to learn from you?
Wow.
Right? And it could be macro or micro, it could be past, present, or future, any of that, so take it as you will.
Yeah, mentorship now. And that kind of leads a little bit more into technical assistance. And that's where I'm going with that answer. Find somebody that's done it, that's doing it, and be of service to them, because what they're going to teach you is just priceless.
No. And I think that that's another thing that I focus on in the industry is you want those partnerships of the people from the more mature states, right, to come and bring their know-how, because the way that I look at it is it gives us the capability as, I'm from New York, New Jersey, these less mature states, to shortcut the process.
Correct.
You're hopefully shortcutting the process through product development and everything to be able to put out something that's quality in the market, that's, and it's like how markets mature here. It's, there's a culling right now to a certain extent. There's price compression, right? And you have the cream of the cannabis crop rising to the top. I didn't mean to rhyme. That was just bonus points. So, that's kind of, I feel like what you're seeing here a little bit. And I think that mentorship is so key, right? Because you're calling it mentorship, but sometimes that comes into a business relationship.
So let's call it exactly like that, right? The business is the industry, but legacy has been happening before the industry started.
Exactly.
So we need to complement both. And that's what I'm speaking of. There's people that have been doing it for years
and years and years.
Cultivators that have been passing strains on through their family that you would never find over the shelf.
Got it. So it's cultivate that knowledge. Okay.
I like that.
Yeah. So cultivate the existing knowledge of, the ancestors, right? The OGs, and use it because they have techniques there that can absolutely cross over. That's great. And I want another question for you that we'll wrap up with is there anything else just new and different in the industry that's caught your attention? Is there a trend? Is there,
social media?
Social media.
Because, we come from the era is you give what... I don't even know what this is. I'm going to put it in this little clear bag. Is it a dime? Is it a dub? There apes in it exists, So now you have these girls on rollerblades with colorful hair and these fancy packs, and they don't even know what's inside. So social media to me is a great marketing tool, but it's taken away the importance of the product. We don't know about the product. We don't know about the quality. We don't even know what the strain is.
No, I mean, the social media might get you there to try the product, but does that keep you there?
There's no story.
You don't
just
stay for social media.
Yeah.
You stay for, quality or something that appeals to you. So I see what you're saying. It's a different game. And I always say, like, it's very different going from when we were growing up, when we were smoking, it was a function of you get what you get and you don't get upset.
Yeah.
Versus so many things being thrown at you in this industry, so many brands trying to rise to the top that, social media becomes a tool that you almost have to use. Or else it's, or else you got to find your audience in whatever fashion it is. Social media could be that shortcut to your audience.
Now you just said it, because I don't want to see like that rollerblade quick commercial. I want almost like this Christmas time when they're selling like diamonds and perfume.
Yeah.
And you kind of get that elongated story and they sell you that lifestyle.
Yep.
I think that's where social media and marketing should get back into, is selling that story of a lifestyle versus cleavage and bright colors.
Or more like escapist kind of stuff, right?
Correct,
rather escapist, like, help people picture, right, what it's like when they're actually enjoying the product. And I think that doing it from that approach adds value to the industry, because you're normalizing it then. You're fighting a stigma, right? If you're showing, it's like, it reminds me of that MedMen ad way back when they tried to get on the Super Bowl, right, with the suburban mom, and she just happened to have like a MedMen bag with her other stuff. Like, that's what that kind of reminds me of. But, I think that's, an interesting approach by comparison to flashiness on social media.
Yep. And then you can have like the subtle, like you just said,
there you go.
Brand right there versus it being gaudy in your face.
You see very, very different approaches on a conference room floor, right?
Absolutely.
They're the people who get dressed up, right, as something to catch the attention, versus other people who have organic interactions like this. So, yeah, thank you so much for joining.
John,
it was a pleasure.
It's a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you, Ian. Welcome to another one-hitter episode from NECAN of my highly enlightened podcast for Ganjapreneur. I'm your host, Jon Purow, as always, and I have here with me Paul Vancea from the CFO from Kosmik Brands. Pleasure having you.
Hey there, John.
All right, I'm doing well. So you are an OG from other states, including Colorado and Oklahoma, a very, very interesting market in and of itself.
Yeah.
What are, as an outsider's perspective, what are your thoughts on the feeling that you're getting from the Massachusetts market from this conference and kind of the conference itself?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a very exciting market. And we've been here for, I believe, more than 2 years now. Mm-hmm. We can see that it's consolidating. A lot of people are going out of business, but whoever is in the business is really bringing their A game. So it's very competitive at the same time. What I like, unlike Oklahoma and even Colorado and some of these other markets, they are maintaining their pricing. I know there's a little bit of pressure and everyone always wants to go down, but by far they're still doing really good. It's still worth it. There's still a lot of meat on the bone. For the operators. And I think whoever's going to, this competition, whoever's going to be last is going to dominate for a while. It's kind of like a purge.
Exactly. It's a culling. It's like a cannabis culling, right? And then you get what remains is the cream of the cannabis crop.
And, we're lucky. We do the licensing model. So when we come here, we partner with a different, with a processor. And we're lucky to have a really good processor in regenerative. And, even today they had a massive presence. They won a bunch of awards, including best of the category.
That's great.
Yeah. And, with Kosmik too, we won awards for our liquid diamond 2-gram vape.
Okay.
So it's always a good feeling when we go into different markets and we try to replicate what we learn in Oklahoma and then bring it here and, the people and the public to react to it.
Yeah. So, so here's something, you talk about the quality, right? Obviously, selecting a quality manufacturer. I'm curious to know, just in general, as I like to ask, what's something that the industry has taught you that you'd like to teach others, right? What is some knowledge that you'd like to pass on? Is it, what you look for in a manufacturing, partner? What jumps out at you?
The big thing is you have to do your work. You have to almost micromanage. And I know that usually gets a negative connotation, but especially, for example, us, we operate from Oklahoma. When we come here, you have to check things. You have to make sure things get done. You have to communicate. You have to be on top of it. You can't just assume that, just because you said it once, it's going to happen. Right. And that's usually very true in business in general. But I think in cannabis specifically, just you have to be on top of it. And if you don't have time to manage it, it's probably not going to happen.
Exactly. And if it's, we are one of the most highly regulated industries that there is. Right. So you need to make sure that you're constantly bringing your A game, or that little thing that you forgot or you assumed would be the case because it was the case in another state could come back and bite you.
Yeah, exactly.
So attention to detail. That's an interesting one. Not a lot of people come back with that answer.
And it's very interesting because, Oklahoma, for example, we are one of the most regulated, just the cannabis in general. But I get the feeling it's one of the least enforced.
Yes.
So it's like, here's these rules, but no one's going to care. unless you do it. The minute you do something, it's over.
Yeah. That's
how it feels.
That's the reputation that Oklahoma has outside of Oklahoma.
Yeah.
Right? And so, it has that kind of like wild, wild west of weed, reputation in other states. So I find it, must be very interesting when you come to a state like Massachusetts and it has a different vibe. Ultimately, in terms, every single state has a different vibe in terms of enforcement.
Yeah, no, we love it here. It does have a very different vibe. The quality, the teams here, because we go all over the country. We're in all these different states. So when you choose partners, it's rare to find a partner that has their stuff together and has a full team and they have production and they have all the salespeople. And every time we do something, they show up with 30 people.
That's pretty amazing.
I mean? Yeah, so to have that kind of presence in the market, and then it's not just bodies, but they're winning awards. They're going in the industry. They are one of the biggest providers. So for us, that's, I guess, the other lesson. If you are a brand, it's very crucial to partner with people like that.
Yeah.
Because your success in that state, yes,
depends upon their success to a certain extent at delivering. Yes. Delivering on their promises.
They're your representative in that state.
Yep.
Right? Because you can't be here and replicate your business from your home state in every single part of the country you go to. So you have to find someone that closely aligns with your values and with your business perspicacity.
Yeah. No, and I think it makes sense. Like I was having an interesting conversation earlier with someone where it's talking about, so you're relying on your partners. You don't necessarily know what they're going to ultimately deliver when the contract is signed, right? And there's something to be said for quality rises above because you want recurring customers.
Yes.
Right? Exactly. It's not just, you don't want one, no business is looking for one and done. So if you're looking to, select a manufacturing partner in a different state as a brand, right? Quality matters.
Yes, 100%. Yeah. I would say that's the most crucial part. I mean, your brand can be, God's bread on earth, whatever. Yeah. Like it could be the best thing. But if your representative, if your partners in that state aren't up to the same standards, then it's not going to matter.
Yeah, no, 100%. So to wrap things up, another question to ask you is, what is something new, exciting, in some fashion that you're noticing, or trend perhaps, inside the cannabis industry right now? And you can go macro, micro, however you want to take it.
I love all the effect-driven.
Yes.
Gummies and vapes. It's very interesting, and that's something that we with Kosmik, we're launching new products. We have the Odyssey, which goes from sun up to sundown, and obviously it's a Kosmik Brands product. So explore, launch, explore, orbit, gravity, and then at the end we have the climax, which is the love gummy.
Okay, subtle.
Yeah. So I really like the effect driven. I think sleep and love making is going to be one of those that people gravitate towards.
Work
the most.
Backwards from the use cases that people have. I always like to go back to the interview that I had with Socrates Rosenfeld from Jane. Right, he said, "What are the two most searched terms for consumers? Sleep and pain."
Yeah, there you go.
So, work backwards from the effects if you want a product that could potentially make a dent in the market.
Yeah. That's why we came up with the Black Hole in the very beginning, the 1,000 milligram. And that was Cameron Saina, our COO. And he basically met with a veteran. And at that point, no one was doing 1,000 milligram bags. And this guy said, I have to eat 10 gummies every night just to get 100 milligrams. And that's when Cameron said, well, why not just put 100 milligrams in one gummy?
Exactly.
It is to help alleviate that pain. And that particular individual couldn't smoke vapes or weed joints because his lungs collapsed in war, right? So, I agree with that.
No, I also just think that, it was funny because I consider myself to a certain extent a low dose proponent because sometimes I'm thinking about how you want to branch out into the kind of curious. But at the same time, you need to take care of the people that are dedicated to the plant who, for whatever reason, very specific reasons that you're saying. And I'm sure you were surprised by different use cases that came out of that. But I always thought it was very interesting, these high potency things. Sometimes it is a simple question of cost efficiency.
Yes.
Right? And that's what, the people who have the super high tolerance, as saying someone whose tolerance just keeps on getting larger and larger, right? It's like you're almost like fighting against this increasing wave that's coming at you to overcome. And so I think it makes a lot of sense. And it's, fascinating. It's not so surprising ultimately that you guys were able to find success with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the industry keeps innovating. And, on our part too, we came up with the nano formulations. So right now in Oklahoma, everything we do is nano. And that would just be the standard of all the gummies going forward for us. And it really hits different. It's not just faster, but it's stronger.
Yes.
Right. So people will take a 10 milligram nano and act like they just took 100 milligrams and they're knocked out. Like,
really?
Oh my god.
All right. So that's
so
something.
the speed is obviously the main, but the fact that it just hits you much stronger.
No. I think that you're right about effects based, and it's a function of I think that you could be talking about effects based when you're talking about, tossing in minor cannabinoids like a THC or anything for a focused product, right? Or effects based could simply just be a function of how strong it is.
Yeah, and in addition to the CBN and CBG and all those things which we do, we also do a lot of the functional mushrooms and adaptogens and.
Okay, great. Okay, that's very, very cool. And that's talking about something also on the cutting edge that I think we're going to be seeing more and more of.
Turmeric and ashwagandha and all these supplements.
Yeah, and I think that there end up, I think there'll be more and more products that marry some of these things.
And I think it makes sense because when you talk about the entourage effect, it doesn't just apply to other cannabinoids, but THC does provide entourage effects to a lot of these other supplements.
Exactly.
That have nothing to do with cannabis. It makes them stronger, it makes them better. It interacts with it in a way where it enhances.
No. I think that we're going to see more and more blending for that reason of things. Like, to a certain extent, it's almost like I find it interesting that we don't blend in anything to what we smoke. Right, like a mullein leaf, right? That softens it and makes it softer on your lungs. But I think that there is a future potentially for all of that as we get into more and more specific product diversification and more specific types of consumers that are more and more educated about what's actually on the market that could speak directly to them.
Yeah, it's very exciting and kind of crazy to think just what the future holds.
Yep.
Because in the beginning, most products were the same, and now it just branches into so many specific, unique criteria.
Yep.
Even when we were here at the awards, just the number of categories of awards, it's like, oh my God, there's so many.
Yeah, no, and the number of one of the things I'm taking away and putting in the article is that how the breadth of programming is so wide.
Yes.
Really, I think they've done a good job in terms of encompassing a lot of the parts of the industry really, really well. So with that, I want to thank you so much for being on.
Absolutely,
it's a real pleasure. Thanks for joining. Cheers. Welcome to another one-hitter, right, from the Highly Enlightened podcast, syndicated by Jon Purow. I am your intrepid host,
too many
Jon
weed puns
Purow.
in one sentence.
I'm sorry. It's just the pot punnery is very
Keep
pronounced.
it going. What else we got?
It's very pronounced. I'm a purveyor
It's
of pot
Willie
puns.
Weed.
Yeah, Jon Purow, purveyor of pot puns. Right. So anyways, thank you for being here on the pod.
My pleasure.
So as I like to, ask people in the industry is, tell me something that you've learned from the industry that you want to pass on, that you'd like the industry to learn from you. And that could be,
right,
macro, micro, the recent past, future, any direction.
Do I put it all the way in my mouth? Where does it go? Okay.
You nosh on it.
Here's one thing that this industry teaches me constantly, and it has nothing to do with cannabis.
Yeah.
It is that despite regulation, despite the exponentially more hurdles that cannabis business owners need to jump through in order just to run a company.
Yeah.
Like the idea of perseverance and resilience is like, it's so loud, you know what I mean? Like, it is so obvious to me. And that's the biggest thing I take away from this is like, there's a lot of people here who work really hard, and it's inspiring to me because it makes me want to work really hard.
Yeah.
Nothing to do with weed.
No. I think it's the people.
But also weed.
Weed helps. Weed never hurts, right, when it comes down to it. But it's like, it comes back to the people ultimately.
It's about the people, and for sure there's still a culture here. It's still small enough that there's a culture here. You see the same folks at trade shows.
Yep.
It's like a traveling circus in that way.
Exactly.
We all know each other very well.
Yep.
So it just makes for a stronger, pre-industry industry.
No, agreed. Right. No, I mean, like, look, being I guess a little bit of an OG, right, in the New York market. Right, it just, as you see, for good things to happen to good people who are in it for good reasons, going all the way back to the beginning, it's very, very rewarding seeing those people prosper when the time comes.
Totally, that ain't all of it though. You still like those people are still working their asses off, like tirelessly.
Yeah,
8 days a week.
Yep.
To quote the Beatles.
There you go.
You've done this before.
I've done this before.
Oh, okay. Got it. Many times. Search for this name, search for Will Reed, right? Podcast, cannabis, planners. You're going to find a lot of content out
I
there.
guess. It's not all of it's good. Some of it you'll have to subscribe to. My Patreon,
like his OnlyFans?
My OnlyFans, all of those things. It's a lot of feed content, folks. We'll edit that out.
We're just like living this up right now. So, yeah. So, hello. All right. So,
wow. That's all that. Folks,
my
just saw
ADHD.
the craziest riz of all time happen. That was amazing. What did you even do? You did nothing. Wow, that was amazing. Good for you.
That's a friend of mine.
Oh,
okay.
You ruined it.
Oh, no. Yeah, no. Anyways, but thank you for coming on the podcast and anything.
I appreciate it.
Any parting words? You're good?
I would say don't forget that we are selling weed, so try to have a good time. Try to have a good time while you're doing it. We're on an incredible journey. Like it sounds trite and maybe even a little arrogant to say things like trailblazing or whatever, but like we are the first people doing this sort of thing. So let's have fun while we're doing it.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for
My
being
pleasure.
on here. Cheers.
Absolutely.